Hey makeup friends. So I spend a lot of time on my channel talking about items that I have purchased and items that I want to purchase. And every now and then I will do anti-hauls as well. But what I wanted to do today was to share with you some items that were released over the course of 2020 that I just never gave two figs about. These are items that for the most part all had a lot of hype surrounding them. And it just never piqued my interest, and I have no FOMO over the fact that I have not purchased these. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, just keep watching. Alright, so before we dive into this, I want to welcome you back to my channel, or if you are new here, then welcome. My name is Kara, I'm a working mom of two, and makeup is my happy place. On my channel, we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, I invite you to subscribe. So in preparation for this video, I did go through Trend Mood on Instagram, just kind of refreshed my memory of what happened over the course of the year in the makeup world. And I did make note of some notable releases that did get a lot of hype around them. And I'm going to go through some of those with you. They're not in any particular order, they're not chronological. I do have a list in front of me. Some of them were off the top of my head and then I filled it out with Trend Mood after. But I have quite a few here that perhaps they might surprise you and perhaps not. But these are just my opinions. If you were like dying for these collections and were first in line to get them, that's totally cool. We're totally allowed to disagree on makeup products. That is fine. These are just my opinions and what sparked my interest, or in this case, what just never did spark my interest. So first up, let's talk about a fairly recent release, and that was the entire Beetlejuice collection from Melt. When I first saw the promo pics and when I first heard what the theme was going to be, I was interested immediately. I really do enjoy a lot of the products that I have from Melt. I do find that they're a bit hit or miss, and that gets me a little skeptical because they do have a higher price point. But when I heard that it was going to be Beetlejuice, the nostalgic side of me just kicked in and I was super excited. Well, fast forward to them releasing the actual promo pics of the products and my interest waned immediately. These were just not palettes that were up my alley. I have no issue in playing with color. I enjoy purple. I'm wearing it today. I enjoy red. I enjoy dark smoky colors, but these two palettes just did not do anything for me. To me, both of them looked like I would get a very limited number of looks from either one of them, and I knew that they were palettes that I would review on my channel and then I would very rarely ever reach for going forward. In terms of the lipsticks, there were some really cool options. I mean, the packaging was amazing, but again, these were shade selections that I knew I wasn't going to get a ton of use out of. Gel eyeliners, while again, there were some really interesting and unique colors in this collection, gel eyeliners are just not something that I really fuck with, to be completely honest. I do have a few, and I actually have one from Melt from their Amor Eterno collection, and I can't complain about the quality of it, but I just don't reach for them. So I'm not going to invest the money in something that I know I'm really not going to get any use out of, and my channel is not such that I can drop $350 on an entire PR kit just to do a review and hope to recoup the money, especially for products that I knew really weren't going to bring a lot to my particular table because I wasn't going to get a lot of repeat use out of them. Now, for a myriad of reasons, I really was not interested in any of Jeffree Star's releases this year. He had 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. I guess 4 if you count his lipstick collection. Were they Velvet something? I can't remember what they were called, but I can remember 3 palettes off the top of my head. The Cremated palette, the Orgy palette, and the Blood Money, the green one, the most recent one. Take him out of the equation because I've made it known on my channel I'm not going to be supporting him going forward or his brand. I have in the past, but I have come to the realization that what you see is what you get, and there really have been no strides for change from him, and it's just not something that I can get behind. But take him out of the equation, these just weren't color stories that did anything for me. The Cremated palette had a lot of issues in my own personal opinion. I did not like the idea of cremated so soon after the announcement of a global pandemic. I just thought that it was in poor taste, but also just such a dull color story. To me, I knew that I wasn't going to get a lot of creative looks out of it. And I'm sure some people could and could make really diverse looks using such a limited color story, but I knew that I wasn't going to be one of those people. Likewise with the Orgy palette, again, the name kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I can get past it. I'm really not a prude, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And I can see where makeup artists take the Orgy like screaming off of the cover of it, but just look at the color story inside. I could see where artists would be drawn to that because you would have a shade for basically any skin tone. But for me, I don't need that many matte nude shades in a palette, so I had no interest in it. And then we fast forward to Blood Money, and it wasn't green enough. I know it was a green themed palette, but for me it wasn't green enough. I like punchier greens. Give me Kelly greens, give me forest greens, give me rich, saturated, jewel tone greens, and I'm a happy girl. And I think that's where my issue with a lot of just those color stories, again, we're keeping him separate and just looking at the powders lying in front of us, those color stories just did nothing for me, and I have no regrets in not purchasing them. Again, for a myriad of reasons, but if we're just looking at the color story, none of them tickled my pickle. I'm going to mention two Natasha Denona palettes here. So one was the entire bronze collection, but in specific the bronze palette. It just didn't do anything for me. And if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I do enjoy neutral palettes. I have quite a few that ranked high in my top 10 palettes of 2020. And I just wasn't drawn to this one. I don't know what it was. I think just looking at the shades in the promo pictures, there just wasn't enough diversity amongst them for my own liking. There was a lot of shades in the palette, and I just didn't find that they all brought something unique to the table. So while I'm sure the quality was very good, the color story just did nothing for me. And with palettes of that price point as well, I already have a ton of neutral palettes. It's hard to convince me to shell out that kind of money. Now also, the Triochrome or the Triochrome palette, it just never did anything for me. I don't know, I like the idea that she's branching out into multi-chrome shadows, but there are only 3 in the palette, and those palettes retail for $170 here in Canada. So while I do enjoy her shadow quality and I particularly like her mattes, I didn't want to shell out $170 for 3 multi-chromes and a collection of mattes as well, but none that really sparked any particular interest in me. I have an extensive amount of multi-chrome shadows from Clionadh. I don't feel the need to flesh them out any further than what I already have. And then with mattes, I also have a million mattes. So this was just not a palette that really did anything for me, and therefore I'm very glad that I didn't spend $170 on it. And I still, at this point, after seeing looks done by other people, still have no FOMO over it and no desire to pick that palette up. Now another palette that had a very hefty price tag and had a ton of hype around it was from Pat McGrath, and I'm talking about the Celestial Divinity palette. It was her holiday release for this year. It was a large palette and it did nothing for me, and it still continues to do nothing for me, even though I've seen some incredible eye looks made by other creators. It was not in my wheelhouse. There were altogether too many shimmery shadows. I felt like I would be very limited by the matte options that were in the palette, and while I could look to other palettes to bring into this one, if I'm spending that much money on a palette, I want it to be sort of all encompassing, and this one just wasn't. And also looking at the tones, while I could see some looks kind of jumping out at me, I didn't see enough looks to justify the price point for it. And I know that the price point was lower than some of her 10-pan palettes in the past, but it was still a hefty price tag, and it still just didn't really spark any particular interest or any particular joy in me, and therefore I just let that one go. Likewise, the quads that she came out with this year, just wasn't interested. I bought one of the quads last year as part of her holiday collection, and I gotta say I was underwhelmed by it. It's a quad, there's 4 shadows in it, 2 of which I really do like, but half of which I don't. That's not a risk that I'm willing to take going forward, because I think that quad was about $80 Canadian, maybe even a little bit more than that. And that's a lot of money to spend if all 4 are not blowing my socks off. So I kind of cool it a little bit with Pat McGrath. I don't jump on the hype the same way a lot of other people do. I do have some of her palettes, and while I think they're good, I really don't think that they're anything to lose your mind over, at least not for me personally. I will say I haven't tried any of her 10-pan palettes. I have the smaller 6-pan ones and the quad that I mentioned, but from what I've tried, while they're good, they really don't tempt me to spend above and beyond on them. So that one was an easy pass for me, and I have 0 regrets of not picking that one up. Now the last ones that I'm going to talk about are from a new brand that was released this year, and that is Makeup by Mario. He came out with 3 different palettes. One was an all shimmer palette, one was an all matte neutral palette, and then there was a 5 or 6 pan metallic palette. And that palette also had like a little trough, and you could scrape off some of the shadow, mix it with a mixing medium, and create like a liquid metallic eyeshadow out of it. And while I think in particular that one was quite unique and quite innovative, it's not something that I know I'm gonna fuck with on a going forward basis. I would definitely play with it for the purposes of doing a review and a video on it, or maybe a couple Instagram pictures, but then it's gonna go into my drawer and I'm probably never going to use it again. So I wasn't gonna put the money out for something like that where I know on a day-to-day basis, I'm just not gonna bother with it. With respect to his fuller sized palettes, the all shimmer one and the all matte one, I viewed them more as a package deal, because for me, I'm not going to get anywhere out of an all shimmer palette unless I bring in some mattes with it. Likewise, an all matte palette, while I'm more inclined to go that route, I do like having shimmer on my lid. I don't generally wear all matte looks. It's been known to happen, and I'm not pulling a hard line to say I would never do it, but generally speaking, I do enjoy having some sort of shimmer on my eyes. So I could have bought the 2 palettes together, or I could have just bought a different palette that had a balance of shimmers and mattes. So while I am curious about what Makeup by Mario is going to put out next, and I'm certainly not writing the brand off, because fingers are crossed that he comes out with some complexion products, because I think those would be amazing, I'm just not interested in the palettes. Nor was I interested in his lip palette, which again I think was really innovative, and I watched some videos of him using it and showing how to use it, and I think even just the design of it is really cool. The little palette flips right out so that you can mix right there and everything is all contained. I think that's really cool, and again, really geared toward an artist, and I think artists would really appreciate that and get a ton of use out of it. But again, I'm not an artist. And for me, I'm not going to sit at my table here and get ready in the morning and basically become a scientist and create these different colors to apply and then try to replicate them throughout the day. I'm not carrying a lip palette in my purse. It's just not going to happen. So for me, the products that he released first, while they certainly make sense from an artist perspective, and they certainly make sense from a brand perspective because he is an artist, it just wasn't anything that jived with me. I was not the target audience, and it just wasn't for me, and that's perfectly fine. I'm hoping that in future there will be some products that he releases that are more for the everyday consumer, because I would be very curious to try some products from Mario. Alright, and with all of that said, I'm going to wrap this video up here, but I would love to hear from you in the comments. What are some products that you just didn't give a crap about this year that a lot of other people seemed to? I would love to know what products never sparked any sort of FOMO in you and what you have no regrets over having left at the store. Alright, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.